Hi, thank you so much for coming back. I hope you're looking forward to the next chapter. My name is Jill, if you're new here. I am reading my book, which is called Free Will, and it is available for sale on Amazon. The link is below in the description. The previous chapters, including the preface, which comes before chapter one, um, the links are down below for all those other chapters if you want to get caught up. But I'm so glad that you came back to check the next chapter out, hoping I'm keeping you interested enough to keep coming back and do a little listening to story time. So when we finished up last, my stepdad had just moved back, and we all moved into a house together again. So it was time for me to start getting some independence. So that's where we're going today. We're on chapter 15, and I think we're going to do just 2 chapters today. I know I was originally going to only do one, but it's kind of hard to only do one sometimes. You just want to go to the next thing that happens. Okay, so let's jump right in. I moved out pretty soon after stepdad and mom got back together. I was almost 19. I had gotten a better paying office job now and a sweet little V-dub. 2 of my good friends needed another roommate to help with rent on a cool pad in Dana Point. So it was a perfect opportunity. Rent was $125 a month. My car payment plus insurance was about $100. I didn't need to make much money to live comfortably. Living out on my own, away from the family, was so exciting. I got a taste of making my own decisions. There was no drama or yelling anymore. It was peaceful there. And we had a lot of fun. We had beach bonfires, barbecues, parties, and lots of friends. It felt so good to be a grown-up. After being out on my own for a while, I realized that with such low overhead each month, I didn't necessarily have to stay at the great paying office job. I was bored stiff doing office work. I eventually decided to quit my full-time gig and started waitressing. I got a job at Marie Callender's in San Juan Capistrano. I made a bunch of really nice friends while working there. I am so grateful that a handful of them I still count as friends today. Hi guys! Waitressing afforded me the chance to work way less hours, but still make decent money. Plus, I loved it. It was fun and social. At the same time, I was beginning to get more and more involved at church. My light work schedule made it easy for me to devote more of my time to my religious duties. I started spending most of my free time doing volunteer preaching work, even doing missions where I'd travel with a small group to somewhere in America where the good word needed to be spread. I was a preacher. I felt good about what I was doing, and I really believed in my heart that I was helping people. Doing these missions, the JWs called them doing unassigned territory or working where the need was great, felt like the first real spiritual choice I had made as an adult, completely on my own without the prodding of my mom or strictly out of guilt. I can remember sitting in the middle of a rural area somewhere near Plainview, Texas, taking a lunch break from our preaching work. We sat in my friend's T-top Mustang parked under the shade of a tree. It was hot, but a gentle breeze swirled across me. I breathed in the tenderness of the moment. I felt connected with God. I felt like everything I was doing there was helping me feel okay with God, like I was really doing what He wanted. I believed that I was helping people that I was preaching to. I had saved money for several weeks to take this trip. We paid for our own gas, food, lodging, and for all our supplies for the trip. We gave our time freely. These trips were 100% voluntary. Although the organization did organize them and draft them, it did not fund them or subsidize them. A little research will show clearly that Jehovah's the Jehovah's Witness organization has a long history of using the time and resources of its parishioners to accomplish their goals and intentions at great benefit to the organization, but at little or no cost to them. We endured long, hot, blazing days, days that began before the sun came up, and we went till after dark, so that we reached as many people as possible with our imagined truths. In my heart, it felt right. We were well received and very successful. We gave out Bibles, JW books, and magazines galore, and we started Bible studies with many people. We made many friends and completed our mission. I remember praying to God then. I called him Jehovah. I asked that he be pleased with my work and that people would be saved and get everlasting life, in part because of my efforts. It was the first and last time that as an adult, I truly, wholeheartedly believed the faith that I was raised in was the truth, that my life's purpose was to do this. I took my spirituality seriously. I wanted to be good. I wanted to please God. I wanted to live forever in paradise. My faith told me that this was the one and only truth. This truth was the only thing I'd ever been taught. I was told we were studying and researching the scriptures thoroughly to glean an accurate knowledge of God's word and applying these truths in our lives. I believed with all my heart this was true and right and good. Even though I'd finally been truly acting like a devoted Jehovah's Witness, even though I was convinced that it was true, there were some things that continued to bother me and kept nagging at me at the back of my mind. These things had been bothering me for quite a long time, actually. Was my dad bad? Would he die at Armageddon if I could not convince him to come back to the truth? Was my sister bad? She always seemed to me to be the best and kindest person I'd ever known. I started saying things in my head that I couldn't say out loud. I don't think I want paradise if my dad and my sister can't be there. Why can't God see how beautiful they are? Why did this feel so unjust? What about the countless other so-called worldly people that I knew that were good and wonderful human beings? Why would God be so unjust, and why would he make it so hard to please him? Did this organization have the right to claim it was God's only organization on earth? This organization that claimed to keep itself clean by kicking out any who broke the rules, shunning them? I was told that justice was one of God's most important attributes. If that was true, why did my church's policies seem so unjust? My faith was wavering. I was fighting inside myself to strengthen it, pushing myself to do what was right. Be strong, be faithful. And yet, I couldn't justify the condemnation of so many beautiful people that I loved. Yet if this religion was the only true religion, that meant all these people were going to be destroyed at Armageddon. I believed with all my heart that it was true. It was all I'd ever known, but it just didn't feel just. My faith was my stronghold, the one thing I had to keep hold of to be safe and feel like I was doing the right thing. Yet something inside me was begging to be heard. Something is not right here, but I was scared of not believing. Confusion was setting in, and not for the first time. So you can see I was kind of like at both ends of the spectrum at the same time. like doing unassigned territory. I got really amped and kind of, really got into that whole pioneering and volunteering for that type of work and everything. But even though I did feel like it was right, I had this underlying questioning going on that never even stopped, even when I was at my best in the organization. Um, so that confusion obviously ends up with someone that's not going to hang with it very long. So I guess it's not a bad thing that I had all that confusion, but we'll go on to chapter 17. It starts getting juicy here. I continue to try to remain faithful, strong, loyal in my Christian faith, but I try to have fun too, within the strict confines and guidelines of the church. My social life was fun now that I was out on my own, but lacked interesting men. Just like when I was in school, I was not supposed to date outside the church, but in the church was slim pickings. I would have a random date here or there with someone way too old for me or someone way too nerdy for me. I found my standards were getting lower and my expectations of who I might marry seemed dismal. You see, within the church, like so many areas in life, the guys had the upper hand. There were always more guys than girls. So the girls were so happy to finally be asked out that even if you were really a hot chick, you would end up dating someone that was not so hot. When I started noticing my own standards, I balked. Another maybe not so obvious subtlety that existed within the church was the complete lack of planning for one's future. Our priority was the paradise that would be brought about via God's kingdom. Telling others about God's kingdom was our ambition. This, we told, was God's purpose for us being here. We were supposed to focus all of our energy and resources to the furthering of that purpose. Higher education was always frowned upon, for it would distract from work and worship we should be giving God. For a young girl, the future held out was simply to be a submissive wife and full-time preacher. So I never even thought about a career or what I would do as an adult after high school. In retrospect, I see why at times I was so consumed with being able to date guys outside the church. Even with that confusion, I was erroneously deluded into thinking that landing a great man was the only key to a good future. Waitressing afforded me the opportunity to meet a wide range of people. Even though I was sporting my fetching Marie Callender's uniform, consisting of a giant green bow tie and matching Bermuda shorts and knee socks, I was asked out a lot at work, many times by good-looking, successful, smart, funny men. Finally, I gave in to one of them. I went out on a date with a worldly man. Worldly was supposed to be a condemnation, but sounds like a compliment now. This guy was the epitome of worldly. He had the vibe of Mick Jagger. He had sex, drugs, and rock and roll written all over him. Late one night, I found myself in the arms of this very sexy, very experienced guy. I was very interested and very confused, but I was pretty sure I wasn't ready to have sex with him. As cute and sexy as he was, I barely knew him. As a kid, I had kissed quite a few boys, but that's all I had ever done. I was inexperienced and perplexed about what I wanted. I would be kicked out of the church if I did have sex. The church's teachings had convinced me that sex was only for marriage. But time was ticking, and I was getting tired of waiting for Mr. Perfect church guy. I almost lost my virginity that night. I had never been alone with a worldly man before. I had never been urged to take things to the next level. Never been on never been near third base, let alone a homer. Things almost got out of hand that night. It scared me. I thought, this is why I have to date in the church. It's safer. That's what the church always wanted me to believe. And I did feel that I was in over my head. I didn't know how to date non-JW guys, but dating in the church was so lame. I was bored. I dated a couple more guys I'd met at work, but my guilty conscience kept me going back to try harder to follow the church rules. Eventually, my guilt won out and convinced me to do what I was supposed to do. I tried ever harder to curtail my personal preference and to only date guys in the church. One night, I went to a party up in Whittier at this real posh club with a bunch of friends from church. I met a good-looking JW guy from LA that asked me to dance a few times. He asked for my number, and I was really looking forward to his call. He waited a week or two to call, which didn't inspire confidence in me that he was all that anxious to see me. But I accepted. We went to see the Pageant of the Masters in Laguna Beach. This was something that I had just done with friends the weekend before, but I was happy to oblige. It's a romantic setting outside under the stars, watching humans recreate art masterpieces live, accompanied by an orchestra. You would have thought the romantic setting would have lit some sparks, but there was nothing there. I was attracted to this guy physically, but his personality was so drab. I don't say this to be mean. I'm sure he's a sweet and possibly a great companion for the right person. But I admit it, I am a firecracker. I love life and crave excitement, variety, and tons of laughter. Going out with guys like this was such a buzzkill. The morning after this date, I was asked by my friend from work, Karil, to go on a boat ride with her and some other friends to Catalina. I accepted. I was getting pretty comfortable hanging out with my non-JW friends, and what a contrast. It was a beautiful day on a luxurious boat, and we flew across the water at high speed, drinking beer, getting suntanned and windburned. We anchored just off Catalina Island in a remote little cove. Somebody pulled out a joint and lit up. I smiled. I always loved the smell of marijuana. During my junior high and high school days, I had my fair share of smoking and drinking, all behind my mom's back, of course, and always with a guilty conscience. But after the previous night's date with the blah guy, I was kind of in a WTF mood. I took a couple hits and jumped in the ocean. A couple of us swam to shore and explored the cove. It was such a fun day of liberation and being myself. The next morning, a bit hungover and groggy, I got a phone call. It was from my old best friend back home. He had been married about 7 years by now. In shock that he'd called, I just listened to him tell me about his life. He said he was very unhappy in his marriage. He joked with me on the phone. We hadn't seen or spoken to each other in years, but it was as if we picked up right where we'd left off. He asked me to go to a concert with him. What? You're married. So what? He said. He and his wife had been separated for a few months and were struggling to make it work. After many jokes and coercion, I agreed to go out with him a couple nights later. What is going on? Little Miss Goody Two Shoes is on wild boat rides with pot-wielding, fun-loving, worldly people, and now agrees to go out with a married guy. How does this happen? Like I said, I was in WTF mode. I kind of didn't care what the consequences were. I was tired of waiting to have some fun. I think the bond we'd had from so long ago felt so familiar and so right. I just threw caution to the wind and gave in. He picked me up at my condo. He came in like he owned the place. That was him. So confident, so warm and friendly, sharp-witted and fun. He looked different to me, more worldly, if you will. With the maturity of a few years, he reminded me of a cross between Sam Shepard and Gary Cooper, but with the brightest blue eyes I'd ever seen. We drove to Westwood. Of course, music accompanied us the whole way. Not on 8-track, but on cassette now. We listened to Alison Moyet, Suzanne Vega, and Colin Hay that night. We walked around, stopped in a rooftop outdoor cafe for dinner and a drink. Then we went and watched a play called Checkmate. It was good and entertaining, but I could feel him staring at me through the entire play. At the intermission, he whispered to me, "Can I touch your nose?" I laughed. I had broken my nose while playing tag in the house when I was a kid and always had a bump on the bridge of it. My little brothers called me ski slope nose. I was really insecure about it. It looked crooked to me. I always swore I would get a nose job when I could afford it. That night, in the audience, in the barely lit auditorium of the playhouse, he said he loved my bump. I believed him. That tender touch on the bridge of my nose opened the door to be even more comfortable with him immediately. After the play, we walked out holding hands. As the night progressed, sparks were flying. We kissed like we'd never done before when we were kids. It was pretty intense, and our date lasted till the wee hours. As he dropped me off at my condo, the paperboy delivered my Orange County Times. So, I told you that guy would be back. So it's really interesting because it's been a while since I wrote the book or read it or anything. And when I read it, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how back and forth everything is. But I can kind of see how it gets that way. I can see how if you're raised by a really strict witness family and you have two parents that are in, it might not be quite as confusing. I'm not saying it's not bad, but it might not be quite as confusing. But I was so kind of confused about good and bad, and that black and white thinking, I think, was so ingrained in me from those early years. And I mean, I'm still finding I've come a long way for sure, but I'm still finding, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, why am I being so black and white about this? What's the big deal? And I'm so happy to let go of that way of thinking because it's just kind of ridiculous in our world, I think. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that juicy little chapter. It's going to get even juicier. It's kind of embarrassing reading some of these things, but that's okay. I can handle it. I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are enjoying the book. I hope you come back. Again, please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hit your notification button. That way you'll know. I wasn't originally intending to post a new video every day, but once I got started, I just kind of was on a roll. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if I can continue to do that, but that's another reason why I've been doing a couple chapters at a time so that you can get a little bit more at a time. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Peace.